and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. This week, Ukrainians are marking the 86th anniversary of the Holodomor, which killed millions of Ukrainians between 1932 and 1933. The Holodomor was artificial famine introduced by Stalin's regime. It is considered to be one of the most devastating events of the 20th century. To talk more about that period, we welcome to our studio today Yana Prymachenko. She's a senior research fellow of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, Institute of History of Ukraine. So hello and thank you for joining.
Hello.
According to the historians' estimates, how many people exactly officially are considered to be the victims of the Holodomor?
Well, according to the last research, the total victims of the Holodomor is 4.5 million people.
This is an official number?
Yes, this is.
Is there unofficial data?
This is the final research which were made by the Institute of Demography of Ukraine, National Academy of Science. I think for now it's the most correct data. But we also have another data which is pointed out 7 million victims of made-man famine in Ukraine.
Why such a big difference in 4.5 million and then 7 million?
Well, 7 million, it was the first actually amount of victims. It was suggested by Ukrainian diaspora, and for that period they didn't have an opportunity to work with archives. Okay. But in 1990s, our researchers worked in the archives in Moscow, and this is the correct number, is 4.5 million.
Now that the scientists have more opportunities to work with the documents and archives, because previously a lot of paperwork have been classified. So are there many documents that have been declassified over the past, let's say, 10 years? And how many of them have stayed classified that we would not know what's in them?
Well, in Ukraine, all archives are open now. Yes, okay. Declassified. But in Russia, we have the opposite situation, and now it's very problematic to work in Russian archives, especially for Ukrainian researchers. But still, we have some documents which were also published in 1990s in Russia, and these documents provide us enough evidence just to understand what happened in 1932-33. And in 2009, the Security Service of Ukraine conduct a lot of data. It's 243 volumes evidence of the Holodomor. And this actually data allows Ukrainian court to recognize Stalin, Postashev, Kaganovich, Chubar, Hatayevich as the main organizers of the Holodomor in Ukraine.
This crime against the nation, and I'm talking about Holodomor now, has been hushed, right, for decades of years. And now that we're starting to talk about it, that the international community starts to recognize it as the genocide against Ukrainian nation, what else? What should we do in the future in order to keep this memory, in order for the future generations to bear in mind that we had such a devastating moment in our history?
Well, I think there were lots done for now, because we have this commemorate date. Right. I mean, every fourth Saturday of November is a day when we remember the victims of the Holodomor, and I think we should remind in international level that this was a genocide. For now, we have only 16 countries who recognize Holodomor as genocide, but I think the Ukrainian government should work in this way, just to get the official recognition, I mean international recognition, Holodomor as genocide.
The fact that other countries are starting to recognize the Holodomor as the genocide of the Ukrainian nation, even though there are not many of them, but we're still on that path, does that form the Ukrainian identity in a different way in the eyes of the international community or not, in your personal opinion?
I think it's very important just to organize something like a Nuremberg II, because the Nazi crimes were condemned by the international community, and as for the communist crimes, they weren't condemned by the international community, and that is a problem, because if we didn't condemn these crimes, it could be, it can happen in the future again. Right. So it's very important just for the recognition that the Soviet regime was actually criminal.
I know that in the Museum of the Holodomor, there is such an event held, if I'm not mistaken, on a weekly basis. Survivors come and share their stories with the younger generation. We do realize that there is not enough, not a lot of the survivors left. Yes. Up to this day, as of today. However, maybe you know or remember any personal stories that struck you the most and you would like to share right now.
Well, there are a lot of documents, I mean, a lot of scientific documents and scientific data where all these memories collected. I mean, the memories of the survivors of Holodomor. And we still have some children of Holodomor, if we can call them so in such a way. They can actually recollect this period, these events in their memory. So I think we just should maybe spread this information among the young generation. I think maybe in schools, just the young generation of Ukrainians understand what happened in 1932 and 1933.
My grandfather was a survivor of the Holodomor. Unfortunately, he passed away. Anyway, his brightest memory was that when he was taken away from his family, his mom, my great-grandmother, ran after the carriage with the horses, and she threw, hoping that he would catch a loaf of bread. He remembered till his last day that loaf of bread laying on the ground. Now, this is a symbol of the nation being actually starved to death. How did Ukrainians, not all of them, of course, but how did they actually manage to survive the horrible 1933?
Well, the main target of this man-made famine was actually peasants, because they're very active in 1930s. They didn't want to go to collective farms and organized uprising, and it was very dangerous for Stalin's authority. And he just in such way tried to broke this uprising, just to broke the peasants. But still he understands that he needs some peasants to live, because someone needs to work on the ground in the collective farms. So we have the spirit of Holodomor. It's actually 5 weeks when there was the peasants were totally blocked in the area of famine, and then they were allowed just allowed to remove from this area. So this allowed some people to survive.
My last question would be kind of personal. What do you think is the reason that makes a person do such horrible things to other people? Is it just the authority?
Yes, it's about the authority, and maybe he's believed in the actually communist revolution. It was a so-called second communist leap when they tried to organize some ideal society. But this ideal society, actually, the idea of create such ideal society turned out in the catastrophe for Ukrainian peasants.
Well, hopefully it will never, ever happen again, even though history tends to repeat itself. Let Ukrainian nation never go through another genocide and artificially created famine. Thank you so much for coming here, and thank you so much for sharing the information with us and our audience.
Thank you.
That was Yana Prymachenko. She's a Senior Research Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine and Institute of History of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching Head to Head. Stay tuned with UATV for the rest.